Right. Well, real quick, for those that don't know me, I'm Coach Hutch. I teach AP World History. I do this like once a year, so I'm really excited about to get to teach US at least once a year. I used to teach US here at Allen several years ago, but now I'm full-time AP World History. So, but the progressive era is pretty awesome, I have to admit. Of course, the time period of progress, right? It's in its own name. So, well, you know what? We'll go ahead and get started, guys, so that maybe you can have some downtime before your next session, okay? Okay. So what we're looking at today, guys, is the progressive era. Keep in mind, it is a period of widespread like social activism. You're looking at social and political reforms that are happening, especially across the United States. During this time period, when I say the time period, we're looking at 1890. Looking at 1890 to about 1920, okay? Just to kind of give you a generalized kind of summary of what the progressive era is all about. So when you look at progressive era, it's like I said, it's kind of in its name. There's progress during this time period, or what they're attempting to make things in life a little bit better, okay? So kind of the things we're gonna look at, realize that when we talk about some of these muckrakers, a lot of them are going to come from the middle class, and they're going to start to kind of criticize and challenge political authority. Maybe it's the political machines, it could be big business. Any of that's going to be kind of what they start to criticize and say, hey, this is an issue. Okay. Now, the first thing I really want to talk about wasn't really an issue, but I do want you to have an understanding of the approach the US is going to have as far as the economy goes. Now, to give you some background on laissez-faire, what that means is kind of hands-off or hands-free. It was developed by, oh my gosh, I went blank. Adams. Oh my gosh, Adam Smith, sorry. Back in the 1700s, and over time, of course, the US is going to eventually adapt it as far as their approach to the economy. So if you really want to give laissez-faire a definition, what I would say, it's little government interference in the economy, okay? Now, that's really all I'm going to say as far as laissez-faire goes. Just realize that could pertain to things like Standard Oil. You can look at Andrew Carnegie as well, JP Morgan Chase, with some of these monopolies are developing, okay? And so that's why you see very little government interference at the time, okay? All right, now, one of the first issues we're gonna look at is going to result in what is known as the Pure Food and Drug Act. All right, now this is going to eventually be enacted in 1906. And the reason this develops is actually due to a muckraker known as Upton Sinclair. Now, Upton Sinclair is going to write a book called The Jungle Book, and it's going to focus on the issues of the meat packing industry. Now, I don't want you to assume what some of those problems are, but most likely it's probably exactly what you are thinking. Prior to the Pure Food and Drug Act, the meatpacking industry could say that it was a certain meat was beef, and it may not have been beef. Sometimes also, especially if you're dealing with like meat grinders and stuff like that in the factories, sometimes accidents would happen, such as a finger or something. They would still pass that off as beef sometimes, okay? So with this kind of being brought to light, what the US government eventually does is starts to regulate the meatpacking industry. So now what's going to happen is that not only is the meatpacking industry going to start having to put what the active ingredients are But those that were producing drugs are going to say, okay, this is what's going into the drugs as well. And so you had the development of what we know today as the FDA. Are you good? Oh, okay. I'm getting treats here. Okay, so really, like I said, that will eventually, of course, today we know it as the FDA. Oh, you are so sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, now the other issues we're going to start to see really has to do with kind of urbanization. Okay, now realize, we had what was going on in the Gilded Age with the Industrial Revolution. People are starting to look for jobs. That also means that in the US at this time, in dealing with urbanization, yeah, we talked about the increase of population, cities are growing, but you're also going to have a huge amount of immigrants coming into the United States. So some of your major cities, such as like Boston and Chicago, New York City, San Francisco, are going to see an increase of immigrants. Now, the question is how do we help those immigrants? Not, a lot of times they would come in and be like, okay, what do I do now? What do I do? So what we start to see actually start to set up because of this increase of urbanization that we see are what are known as settlement houses. Okay, now this is going to be developed by a lady named as Jane Addams. And we'll talk about her here in a minute, a little bit more about her in a minute. Now, her house that she eventually sets up, which is known as the Whole House in Chicago, will be there to kind of help aid newly incoming immigrants, whether if it's through helping them learn how to speak English, apply for jobs, look for homes. So they were there to really kind of guide these new immigrants into what they needed to do, okay, in order to kind of eventually settle and be successful. All right, now, another thing with urbanization is, as far as a problem that we start to see, is a lot of tenements are going to start popping up in these major cities. Now, these tenements were not regulated. You had anywhere between 2 to 3 families in a tenement, leading to a lot of course, unsanitary conditions. And we'll talk about kind of some of the reforms that we see there, because prior to, a lot of the tenements didn't have fire escapes, and so some issues do arise, but reforms are going to happen due to this. Okay. All right, let's talk about the muckrakers real quick. Now, to kind of give you a background of what a muckraker is realize a lot of the time it really kind of focused on journalists who are exposing an issue. A lot of times they don't have to be journalists. They could be just social reformers saying, hey, this is an issue. We need to solve it. Okay. Now, I've already talked about a couple of them. The first, of course, I've already talked about, which is Upton Sinclair with the jungle. Okay. And of course, that had to deal with the meatpacking industry. The second person I mentioned talked about Jane Addams and how she was giving aid to immigrants through settlement houses. Another one that I would like for you guys to know is the name Jacob Riis. Now, Riis is actually spelled R-I-I-S. It's not like your typical Reese, okay? So R-I-I-S, okay? Now, he is going to be a photographer, and he is the one that will eventually start producing images of, these immigrants or even lower class classes in the way they live. And so you're going to see pictures of tenements, the unsanitary conditions they were living in, that type of thing. Now, he will eventually produce or publish his photographs into a work called How the Other Half Lived, okay? Some others you will need to know is Susan B. Anthony. All right, and she's going to be a big component for the women's suffrage movement. All right, you're going to have Ida Tarbell, and she is going to be a huge critic. And of course, she will publish some works that will not paint John D. Rockefeller in a very good light in his business practices. Okay. The last two really is going to deal with some civil rights issues. Okay. The two you will need to know, you have Ida B. Wells. She is going to be the co-founder of the NAACP. She is also trying to fight for civil rights. She's trying to, of course, bring to light the lynchings going on in the South. Now, along with her, you have W.E.B. Du Bois, and it's spelled D-U-B-O-I-S. He is also going to be another co-founder of the NAACP. All right, once again, he is going to protest against lynchings, the Jim Crow laws that are in the South. He's going to fight for discrimination that they start to see within the South as far as education goes, as far as employment goes. They're going to be big components and fighters for those type of things. All right, last but not least, you have 4 progressive amendments that you will need to know. So I'm going to go over each one, and then I'm going to give you like a little saying to kind of help you remember those for the day of the exam, okay? So the first one that we're going to talk about is the 16th Amendment. So the 16th Amendment is going to cover what is known as the income tax. Okay, so 16th is income tax. Now you also have the 17th, which is the direct election of senators. Okay, you have the direct election of senators. 18th is prohibition. Okay, if you don't know what prohibition is, it is the illegal sale of alcohol. Okay, and then the 19th is women's suffrage. And if you don't know what that means, it's definitely the women's right to vote. All right, so I'm going to go back over each one of those again, okay? So the 16th is income tax. The 17th is direct election of senators. 18th is prohibition. And then 19th is women's suffrage or women's right to vote, okay? All right, so like I said, when I used to teach US history, I would teach this little saying to help them kind of remember the progressive amendments, okay? So here's the little saying if you wanna like maybe type this down for yourself, okay? And the way it goes is you have $16 for 17 senators, for 18 drinks, for 19 women. Okay, I'm going to go over that one more time. So you have $16 for 17 senators, for 18 drinks, for 19 women. Okay, so that will help you remember the progressive era amendments. So those are the 4 that you will need to know: the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th, okay? All right. What I'm going to ask you guys to do, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. Meanwhile, what I'm going to do, I'm going to post your attendance. I know I hate to tell you, you have to do it again, but you do. So make sure you fill out that form for us, okay? Y'all have any questions over the progressive era? Anything you would like me to go back over? Nothing? Anybody? All right, guys. So what I'm going to do, if you feel like you're pretty good, you are free to go. Don't forget that your next session will start at 10:45. Okay? Have a wonderful Saturday.
Thank you.
Yes, you're more than welcome. Have a good one. Anshul, it's good to see you, bud.
Have a good day.
You too.